Okay, so you can see, oh my god, the table is moving. What couldn't I put under the table to stop it from moving? I just not put my foot on it. You can see behind me, as Mata Esther said, picture of the Rebbe. This place is really coming together. Baruch Hashem. I'm looking for something I could stick under the table to stop it from moving. Okay, anyhow. I'm here by myself today, except for the picture of the Rebbe so far. Maybe Ari will show up. I'm guessing he will. Let's see what I have in my pocket. I have something I can put underneath the table. That's not going to do it. Okay, anyhow, we'll figure it out. So, going on a journey with me. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, Shalom Aleichem to Yael. Of course, a Jew is never alone. Hashem is always with us. And to Mata Esther, and to everyone else who's watching. Of course, my mother, who joins us every week. And Be'ezrat Hashem will be here soon with a permit that she got miraculously. So before I start, I want to share with you two, and Shalom Aleichem to Jeff, I see is joining us, two stories I came across this week, or not this week, but recently. One of them is from I can't say his name, Yoharom Gaon, who's one of Israel's most famous musicians, actors, entertainment figures, one of the old classic ones. He has a radio show called Gaon Baradio on Fridays, and I listen to it every week. I've been listening to it for many, many years. If you understand Hebrew, it's a beautiful, beautiful show. You can find that on Galei Tzal. So he shared the story, hi to Zahava. He shared this story on the show a couple of weeks ago. There was a guy, he was in New York, and his business had failed. He was going bankrupt, he'd lost everything. And he was sitting on the bench at Rockefeller Center and in Manhattan. And this guy comes over to him and he says, what's going on? And he says, my business is falling apart and things are a wreck. So the guy sits down next to him on the bench and he says, tell me what happened. He said, well, I made some poor decisions. I got into a lot of debt. And the truth is, if somebody would just lend me the money to pay off the debt, I could probably get myself back out of bankruptcy. So he said, you see this building back here? It says John D. Rockefeller. Well, I happen to be John D. Rockefeller. And here I'm going to write you a check. I'm going to write you a check for the whole sum of money that you owe, plus another $100,000 to get you going. And next year, at this time, you come and meet me right here on this bench, and you'll pay me back the money. So the guy takes the check from John D. Rockefeller, and he goes back to his office, and he looks at the check, and he says, I can pay off all my debts with this, and I'll have money to get started again in business. And he's very excited, and before he cashes the check, he says, you know what, I'm going to put the check aside, and if I need it, I'll use it. But for now, I'm not going to touch the check. So he starts calling people, and he says, listen, I want to make a deal here, and I want to try to refinance things here. And he starts paying off his debts. Before you know it, he becomes profitable. And a year passes, and he takes the same check. He's going to return it to John D. Rockefeller. He goes back to the bench exactly a year later, and the guy comes and sits down next to him. And he says, so how did it go? He says, I have to thank you, Mr. Rockefeller. You saved my life. And here's the check. He gives him back the check. And just at that moment, this woman comes running over to the two of them. And she says to the businessman who had recovered, she said to him, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. He escapes sometimes. He says, what are you talking about? He said, he pretends that he's John D. Rockefeller. He's not really. He just pretends that he is. And he has a fake checkbook that he made, and he gives out checks all the time. He's really in the mental ward over here, and I got to take him back. So the lesson being that, sometimes you need somebody to inspire you. Sometimes, I guess, for us, as Hasidim, sometimes it's a little hard to have faith in Hashem. Sometimes you have to have faith in human beings to help us along. Another story that I read, short story, and then we're going to get into the lesson. Maybe Ari will show up, we'll see. So there was a woman, she came to the bank, an old woman, she comes to the bank, and she goes to the teller, she waits in line, gets to the teller, and she says to the teller, I want to take out $10 from my account. So the teller says to her, I'm really sorry, but we have a new rule that for anything under $25, you have to go to the ATM outside. So the woman said, listen, I'm an old woman. I don't know how to use the ATM. Please just take out $10 from my account. And they went back and forth, and the teller said, I'm really sorry. My hands are tied. Those are the rules. So the old woman said, well, how much money do I have in my account? And the teller says, you have $300,000. So the old woman says, good, I want to close my account. I want all the money right now. So the teller says, oh, what? Really? You want to close your account? Everything right now? Well, I'm really sorry. We don't have $300,000 in the bank. You have to come back in a day or two when we have the money here. So the old woman says, so how much money can I take out right now? So the teller says, you can take out $3,000. She says, good, I want $3,000. So the teller counts out $3,000. She gives it to the woman. The woman takes $10 out of the pile and hands the money back to the woman, to the teller, and says, I want to deposit $2,990 into my account. The moral of the story is treat people with respect, especially older people, and don't think you're going to fool them. They've been around a lot longer than us. Okay, so here we go, back into the lesson. We're learning from, what did I do with my glasses? 1 second, gotta get my reading glasses. 1 second, I think I forgot something. In the meantime, I want to find something that I can stick underneath the table. Will I find it in seconds? Will I find it? Probably not. This probably won't work, but I'll do it anyhow. Try it anyhow. Okay, maybe it will work. There we go. Okay, that's better. So, we're on lesson 78 in Likutey Moharan, the second part of Likutey Moharan. And we started last week, it's kind of a long lesson. We started last week with the opening here. I'm going back just to the first sentence here. Beinyan hanhagat hapshitut shel tzaddik haemet, regarding the simple devotions of the true tzaddik. And Rebbe Nachman goes on to, this is Ayin Chet, by the way. He goes on to explain all of these connections, which I'm just going to read a quick review. There are times that the tzaddik is a prustik, a simple, ordinary person. Part 1. The Torah is the essence of life. It is not possible to separate oneself from the Torah, even for a short while. Yet, of necessity, one must occasionally stop to earn a living or care for the body's needs. Part 2. Ordinary people, those separated from Torah, receive life force through the great tzaddik as a result of his interrupting his cleaving to Torah or mystical perception. The tzaddik is then extraordinarily ordinary person, and by drawing life from the road to the land of Israel, is the conduit for bringing Torah and life to the creation. That is part 2. And these are going to show up in what we're going to learn today as well. Part 3. The prototype of this was the world given prior to the giving of the Torah, when everybody was occupied with derech eretz, settling the world. God then sustained the world and gave life solely through chesed chinam, through free kindness. The concept of the treasury of unearned gifts. Now too, whenever we are separated from the Torah, we are sustained and receive life force through the true tzaddik. At the time, he himself is a prustik, and so seemingly undeserving, the tzaddik draws ruach of life from the treasury of unearned gifts to spread God's kindness and enliven with life force even places and people most distant from holiness. So that's where we got up to last week. We're going to continue now, and probably Bezrat Hashem will finish the lesson next week because it's quite long. Ube'emet gam kodem kabbalat Torah, and even before the giving of the Torah, bevadai gam az hayta Torah b'metziyut, then even before the Torah was given, the Torah existed. Ki ha-Torah hi nitzchit, because the Torah is eternal. Omnam az kodem matan Torah, however, then before the giving of the Torah, hayta Torah behelem ubehester, the Torah was hidden and concealed. Hainu ki kol ha-Torah klula be'aseret hadibrot, that is, the whole Torah is found or included in the 10 Commandments, or Aseret Dibrot is also the 10 utterances, but that's Ma'amarot Betach. Ve'az kodem matan Torah, and before the giving of the Torah, היו העשרת הדיברות נעלמים בעשרה מאמרות. Then the 10 commandments were concealed within the 10 utterances shebehem nivra haolam. So we know that the world was created through Hashem's speech. And Hashem is still speaking right now, which is creating the world, and these are just metaphors. Were Hashem to stop speaking, the world would cease to exist. And in a sense, if you just want to make this simple for you and me to understand, my world exists in my mind. The way I perceive everything in the world is through my mind working and functioning. Should my mind stop working, my world would cease to exist. We can even bring it down on an even more narrow level. Let's say we create in our minds a person, and this person now, just think of any person in your mind, create a imaginary figure, and now give this person a life, give them a home, give them a job, give them a family, give them all kinds of challenges and accomplishments in life, and now stop thinking about that person. And the moment you stop thinking about them, they don't exist anymore. So when we say the 10 utterances of Hashem, that's what it is, that Hashem is creating everything all the time, and were Hashem to stop for 1 second, creation would no longer exist. נמצא שהייתה כל התורה כולה נעלמת ונסתרת בתוך יישוב העולם. So it follows that if the Torah is eternal and existed before the world was created, and then when the world was created, it was created with the 10 utterances, and within the 10 utterances the Torah is concealed, then within the whole world the Torah is concealed and hidden within the entire world. Shenivra ba'asara ma'amarot, which was created with the 10 utterances. Now what's the importance of knowing that the Torah is concealed within the entire world? That's the reason that we settle in different parts of the world. Derech Eretz, that's the reason why when a Jew goes someplace and does a mitzvah, they elevate the hidden holy sparks in that place, because the whole world was created with the Torah in it. Ubechol hadiburim shel haolam, ubechol hauvdot va'asiyot. With all of the words that exist in the world, and with all of the actions, the deeds and works, meaning everything that everybody's doing. Hein mi shechotev eitzim or eze uvda sheyeh, whether it's a person who cuts wood or it's some other occupation, bechulam ne'elam Torah. In all of them, the Torah is hidden. The Torah is hidden in everything and everyone and all the time in every place. Ki hakol nivra ba'asara ha'ma'amarot, because everything was created with the 10 utterances. Asher sham ha'torah ne'elama v'nistara kodem matan Torah. Within Hashem's speech, which is creating the world, the Torah is hidden and concealed, and this is the Torah from before the giving of the Torah. V'hatzadik b'sha'ah sheporesh min ha'torah, and the tzaddik, when the tzaddik separates from learning Torah, for example, to go to the bathroom, or to do something unrelated to sitting and learning Torah, v'hu b'chinat ish pashut, and then at that moment the tzaddik is like a simple person. Umekabel chiyut mibchina zo shel kodem matan Torah. How does the tzaddik receive his sustenance? He receives it through this aspect of Hashem's energy that created the world before the Torah was given. Rebbe Nachman writes that simplicity is the key to receiving the Torah and being connected to it. When a person acts with simplicity without any cleverness and sophistication, and this is something that we've heard again and again and again from Rebbe Nachman, the person opens themselves up to the most powerful element of the Torah hidden in the 10 utterances of creation. This is implied in the above quoted teaching of the sages that setting aside Torah perpetuates it, meaning that if you were learning Torah all the time, really all the time without any breaks whatsoever, which would be physically impossible, you would reach a place where you wouldn't be able to continue going forward. It would be like a person whose life, everything went right all the time, or a stock market that went up all the time. Any of these things, we know that life has ups and downs, and so in order to go higher in Torah, you have to separate yourself at times in order to reach a higher place. Comporting oneself in the ways of simplicity, I would say comporting oneself is not a simple way of saying things, in simplicity perpetuates the Torah and enables one to cling to it in those times when the person is an ordinary person, unable to engage in deep study or perception. Rebbe Nachman himself practiced this simplicity. There were even times when the Rebbe would swear, in truth, I know absolutely nothing at all. Right? Tachlita yedi'ah she lo yodim. Like the ultimate level of knowing is to know that you don't know. And then, a minute later, begin to reveal the most wondrous Torah teachings. So when Rebbe Nachman would say, I know nothing at all, that's when he would be able to perceive the highest Torahs. In fact, this is what transpired when the Rebbe taught this lesson, the one that we're learning now. Rebbe Nachman adds, we have seen that when the tzaddik is an ordinary person, he sustains the world mainly through kindness of God, through the kindness of God, which sustained the world prior to the giving of the Torah at Sinai. However, this sustainment is only temporary. The world is primarily sustained from the Torah, which the tzaddik reveals when he returns to this level after being simple, after setting aside Torah to perpetuate it. It is that Torah which provides enduring and full sustainment. So meaning that, and you could just take this as an analogy for life, that whenever, I'll give you an example. I remember saying to Reb Shalom, and I'm pretty sure this is everything I remembered about Reb Shalom, I pretty much put in my book about him. So I said to him, some Shabbases are really high, and some Shabbases are, you got to really work. I can tell you, last Shabbos I had to really work. Some Shabbases I'm just flying, it's like I'm not even in this world. So I said to him, what's the deal? And he said, some Shabbases Hashem is carrying you, and some Shabbases Hashem wants you to learn how to walk by yourself. It's just like a father that's holding his child, and the child starts to walk, and then at some point the father lets go of the child, and the child looks at the father and says, what are you doing? I'm having too much fun walking while you're holding me. You got to take off the training wheels in order to ride the bike. If you keep on the train, when we have high spiritual states and lower spiritual moments, Hashem is doing that because Hashem is showing us this is where you can reach, and then Hashem is letting us go and letting us get there on our own so that we have the strength to go higher and higher. Now, once you can reach a similar level to when Hashem is carrying you, once you reach a similar level that you feel when Hashem is carrying you, that when you have a time when you're, in a sense, carrying yourself, that's what he's talking about here. That's the yeridah, that's the going down, the disconnecting, in order to reach the higher place. Because each time you're basically reaching a plateau. You're climbing up a certain height, you're reaching a plateau. You're climbing a height and reaching a plateau. And when you get to those plateaus, you might think, that's it, I'm finished. I'm not making any more progress. But no, you've really reached the plateau in order to go up higher. On Rosh Hashanah, this is in 1806, Rebbe Nachman taught, in Likutey Moharan, part 160, Rabbi Shimon began, which includes a discussion of this on the subject of stories. In that lesson, the Rebbe explains that people can fall into such a deep spiritual sleep that the only way to revive them is by telling them stories from ancient times. These stories, which contain the deepest mysteries of the Torah, are rooted in the aspect of Rav Chesed, abundant kindness. In the context of our lesson, these stories, for reviving the soul, contain hidden Torahs. The Chesed Chinam, which sustained the world prior to the revelation at Sinai. Right, and we know that Rebbe Nachman has his famous stories. And my Chavruta, I should have mentioned in the beginning, so I went to visit him in the hospital this week. He's supposed to be home now. But we went and we learned Rebbe Nachman's stories. And you would think, oh, what's there to learn in this story? There's these stories and those stories. Rebbe Nachman's stories are not really stories. They're all parables. And Reb Nassan breaks them down and explains all the stories in detail. And that's what Rebbe Nachman is talking about here. Reb Nassan writes that the reason the Torah begins with stories about Adam, Noach, and the patriarchs and the Jews in Egypt, which is what we're learning now, or we're going through now, is that they are all stories from ancient times. Some months before that Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe told the story of the lost princess, the first of the 13 tales that would later form his collection, known as Sipurei Ma'asiot. What is this? Be'ibei hanachal, points out that this is specifically the great tzaddik who descends into simplicity in order to bring life force to the ordinary people of the world. Now, you could probably do this as well, because as we know that a person can get married by taking an oath saying that I married this person, married this woman, on the condition that I'm a tzaddik, even if the person is a rasha gamor, even if the person is completely evil, the oath is still upheld because for 1 second they could be a tzaddik. And the same thing here, a tzaddik is able to descend into simplicity in order to bring life force to the ordinary people of the world. Sometimes we are able to give somebody an inspiring word or a hug or even literally just carry something for that person, and that brings life force to an ordinary person. Even though we might not be tzaddikim, we can play the role of a tzaddik for that moment. This is because the true tzaddik merits receiving the Torah completely and does not need hidden Torah or God's treasury of honor and gifts to sustain him. Rather, he merits life force from the revealed Torah. And precisely because he does not need the chesed chinam, he's able to enter the treasury of honor and gifts and draw whatever he needs in order to sustain others. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Whenever the Jewish people sinned under his leadership, Moshe, the true tzaddik, was able to invoke God's kindness and each time evoke forgiveness for those who had separated from the Torah and distanced themselves from God. So there's another level here of Rebbe Nachman's teachings of always judging people positively and finding the good in everyone and everything. And you know, it's always, when you're training in the army, it's not the same as when you're in a war. Thank God I was never in any wars. I've been here as a civilian in wars, but in the army I was never in a war. But I was in the army, and we did do a lot of training, and you're always training and training and training. Here, we're essentially training for life. We're learning Hasidus in a place where, you know, nothing's really happening except for learning Torah. When you actually get to the point where you have to judge people positively, it's not always so easy. Sometimes you're taken aback and you have to take a few minutes to recalibrate yourself and say, oh, right, this is the lesson that I learned from Rebbe Nachman, that I have to judge everyone positively. So even if at first you're very judgmental of people, and you might say, you know, this person shouldn't do this and this person should be like that, catch yourself and then force yourself to find something positive in a person. And then we're reaching a level of Moshe Rabbeinu, in a sense, a pchina, an aspect of Moshe Rabbeinu, when even though the Jewish people had sinned against Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu would turn to Hashem and say, what, you're going to punish the people now? Let's save the people. Okay, back to the text. וזהו בחינת הדרך של ארץ ישראל, הנאמר למעלה. And this is the concept of the path or the road to the land of Israel, which שהצדיק מחיה את עצמו בעת פשיטותו משם. This is like the supernal path to the land of Israel, in which the tzaddik sustains himself at the time that he is separated from the Torah and behaving as a simple person. כי עיקר כוח קדושת ארץ ישראל הוא על ידי בחינת. Where does the power of the land of Israel, the holiness of the land of Israel come from? It comes from this idea, this aspect of koach ma'asad higid la'amo letet lehem nachalat goyim. This is from Tehillim 111, that Hashem's power was given to the Jewish people so that they should settle to give them a heritage of the nations, but to settle the lands of the non-Jews. Kamosh Peresh Rashi, as Rashi explained, the Pasuk Bereshit v'chulei, and everybody probably knows this. If not, you can take a look. That the first Rashi in Bereshit, you would think, well, Rashi is opening his commentary on the Torah. What's he going to talk about? He talks about how the non-Jewish nations will come to the Jews and say, Listim atem, you're a bunch of thieves, gazlanim. You stole the land of the 7 nations. Now, it's so amazing that Rashi, who lived in the 1000s, you know, what was it, 1060 or something like that, he said one day, when the Jewish people are back in the land of Israel, and who could even imagine back then that such a thing would be, it was really a complete matter of faith. Now I'm born after the state of Israel existed, so it was a fact my whole life. Didn't need faith to know that the Jews would come back to the land of Israel. But Rashi obviously had incredible faith, and he said the day will come when the Jewish people will come back to the land of Israel, and the non-Jewish nations will come to them and say, you're a bunch of thieves. So if you've ever heard the Palestinian argument over why the land belongs to them and it doesn't belong to us, they say, we were here first and you stole our land. Give us back our land. And I spent a few years researching Palestinian propaganda with the intention of writing a book, which I don't know if I'll ever get around to, but it was interesting to do. And that's the Palestinian argument. Just, you stole our land, give it back. Whatever the Jews say, if you're arguing the Palestinian side, you can play ping pong with your eyes closed. Just say, you stole our land, give it back. And that's exactly what Rashi is talking about here. So Rebbe Nachman says, K'moshe Peresh Rashi, Pasuk Bereshit, as Rashi explained or commented on the verse of Bereshit, which is the beginning of the Torah, Shebishvil zeh patach Bereshit. This is the reason that the Torah opens with the words Bereshit, in the beginning. Shelo yamru gaznanim atem v'chulei, so that the nations of the world won't come to the Jews and say, you're a bunch of thieves. Anken patach Bereshit, Bereshit, that's why Hashem opened with the word in the beginning. Ki hu yitbarach bara hakol, because Hashem created everything. Uveretzono netana lehem, uveretzono, I don't know what the continuation is, I guess lekcha mehem. And it was Hashem's will that Hashem should give, and Hashem's will that it should take. So, by the way, if you're ever talking with a Muslim who tells you that, you Jews have no right to settle in the land of Israel, you just say, you have no right to call yourself a Muslim. You say, what are you talking about? Of course I'm a Muslim. I believe in God, and I believe in His authority in the world. So you give Rashi's answer here. So you say, so if you believe in God, then either there is no God and the Jews stole the land, or the God that you believe in gave it to the Jews. And that's what Rashi is saying here. That's what he's saying his answer is. That you say, why did the Torah start with Bereshit? In order to show the nations of the world that Hashem creates the world, and Hashem gives the land to who He wants to, and He takes it away from who He wants to. He took it from them and He gave it to us. This is the continuation of the quote. Rashi explains that the reason the Torah begins with an account of the act of creation is to teach that God created the world and all it contains, and is therefore His to give to whomever He chooses. The nations to whom God originally gave the Holy Land would consequently have no claim when He later chooses to give it instead to the Jewish people. If only it worked that well, but that is the reason. נמצא שעיקר כוח ארץ ישראל מבחינת 10 מאמרות. So it follows then that the main aspect of the power of the land of Israel comes about through the 10 utterances, שבהם נברא העולם, that from them Hashem used to create the world, שהם בחינת כוח מעשיו, that this is connected to the power of His acts, שעל ידי זה היו ישראל יכולים ללך ולכבוש ארץ ישראל. And this is how the Jewish people could go about and conquer the land of Israel. Now, if you've studied the history of the state of Israel and how it came about, it's miracle after miracle after miracle. You would think there was no way that this would ever work. What can I say? I think it was Ben Gurion who said, if you don't believe in miracles and you live in the state of Israel, then you're not a realist. Only a realist believes in miracles if they live here. Rebbe Nachman is now saying, how did this happen? It happened because Hashem gave the power for the Jewish people to conquer the land of Israel. And of course, he told this lesson in 1810, which was probably at the beginning of some Zionist movement, but certainly not, Zionist thinking, but not anything that was practical in any way. The Parparot de Chochmah, which is a commentary on Likutey Moharan, adds a deeper insight. He explains that, in fact, the land of Israel was given to the Jewish people only because they accepted the Torah, and so that they could keep it. As it's written, He gave them the lands of the nations, that they may keep his laws and observe his teachings. But in that case, the nations would seem to have a claim to the land. They could argue that God had given it to them, the land, as a means to receiving their life force. It could not be gotten from the Torah, which they rejected, and so they had no connection to, but by virtue of God's chesed chinam, free gift. Following this line of reasoning, they would feel justified in accusing the Jews of being bandits, robbing them of their heritage. However, this is precisely why God informed his people of the power of his acts. In order to give them the heritage of the nations, which was the quote from Tehillim that we read before, it was to reveal that the whole world, including even the idolaters inhabiting the land of Israel, received their life by virtue of the Torah. That is the power of Hashem's acts, that is the 10 utterances, the 10 commandments, as we mentioned before. True, their distance from Torah mandates that their life force comes in a concealed manner, via hidden Torah. And through the tzaddik, when he is a prustik, a simple person. Nevertheless, the source of all life is the Torah. This recognition counters any claim or accusation that the nations might make against the Jews. Thus, Rashi is teaching that the land of Israel, like all of creation, is an expression of the power of his acts, created only for the Jewish people, and most especially the true tzaddikim amongst them. The only reason that the nations inhabited the land until the Jews conquered it was that the Torah had been hidden for 26 generations, and the sanctity of the land of Israel was concealed. So until the Jewish people came into the Torah, it was basically being held in a concealed way by people who didn't accept the Torah, and wouldn't have accepted it. But after the giving of the Torah, the time had come for revealing the sanctity, the godliness of the land of Israel, and giving the land to the Jews. As Rebbe Nachman states in the next paragraph, it was the time for the Jews to come there, conquer the place, sanctify it, making it a Jewish place. Through the power of his acts, Jews are permitted to conquer the entire world and sanctify it with the sanctity of Israel. Now, this last line here is really important because, there's conspiracy theories saying that the Jews are trying to take over the whole world. And here Rebbe Nachman makes it very clear. It was quoting Rebbe Nachman. So Reb Shlomo was once on German radio. And, Reb Shlomo grew up in Germany and moved to Austria and then eventually to the States. And so he spoke fluent German, obviously, and he was on the radio. And this woman, this was probably in the 80s. I believe I heard the interview once. I've definitely read it. So she said to him, listen, Shlomo, the Jewish people claim that they're the chosen people, that they're better than everyone else. Why do you think you're better than everyone else? And so Shlomo said, no, you misunderstood. We're the chosen people to show everybody how good they can be. That's what we were chosen for. We weren't chosen to be better than everyone else. We were chosen to show other people how good they can be and how holy they can be. And that's what Rebbe Nachman says here, that the Jews are permitted to conquer the entire world in order to sanctify it, in order to make it holy, in order to elevate it. Rebbe Nachman adds that it was therefore imperative that the land of Israel first be in the hands of the nations, of the non-Jews, before being conquered by the Jews. Had the Jews inhabited the land of Israel from the outset and then been cast out for having sinned, the nations who replaced them would conclude that God gave the land based on merit. It would have afterwards been impossible to take it back. The occupying nations could justifiably claim that by sinning, we forfeited the land to them, and any attempt to take it back would be robbery. But God, by first giving them the land of Israel, and then taking it from them and giving it to us, God showed that it is his will to do as he pleases. God gives it to whoever he chooses, not because of merit, but grace. It follows that even those times when the land of Israel is under the non-Jewish jurisdiction, God's will, the concept of the hidden Torah, is concealed there. It was God's wish, his free gift, his chesed chinam, that the non-Jewish nations inhabit the land of Israel. Therefore, we are forever entitled to lay claim to the land because by his wish he gave it to them, and by his wish he gave it to us. And by doing so, we reveal its inherent, everlasting sanctity which the nations conceal. Moreover, the Rebbe explains in the next lesson, wherever Jews settle throughout the world, they conquer that place and sanctify with the sanctity of the land of Israel. This is the power of our faith. We know and believe that God created everything, and everywhere in the world, through his 10 utterances of the hidden Torah, it is our task to reveal the godliness concealed in everything and every place. That is the reason that there is a diaspora, and that is the reason that we're here as Jews. Okay, we're moving on now to part 4c. I don't know if it's separated like this in Likutey Moharan, like the original, but here with the translation they separated to 4c. We've now done A, B, 4a and B, now on C. The Gam Kan, and also here, and now Rebbe Nachman is talking in Uman, so it's here in Chutz La'aretz. The Chutz La'aretz, Nimtza B'china zo. We also have this aspect. Ki Yisrael Am Kadosh Ba'im Lifamim B'mekomot Shayu Echokim Ma'od Ma'od Mikdushat Yisrael. That the Jewish people, being a holy nation, sometimes come to places that are very, very distant from the holiness of the Jewish people, of where the Jewish people should be, basically. Kagon b'makom shayu mitchila shirakum, for example, a place that from the start it was a place of idol worship. V'gam achshav, and even now, hu bereshut mi shehu chok ma'od mikdushat Yisrael, and even now, the land that the Jews are living in is even very distant from the holiness of the land of Israel and the holiness of the Jewish people. I'll come back to that in a second when we finish the paragraph. V'Yisrael ba'im l'shem, and the Jewish people come to them, to come there. V'kovshim hamakom u'makdishim oto, and they conquer the place and they make it holy. Now, anyone who's been to a Chabad house in the middle of nowhere understands what this means. You go to China. I've never been to China, but we have a guest that spent a few years in China, and he likes to talk about the Chabad community there. He says it's a little bubble, and it's really like you're not in China when you're in the Chabad house. You're in a little Jewish land, and that's Rebbe Nachman's idea of conquering the land and making it holy. Whenever you're in a kosher Jewish community, and it's outside of the land of Israel, and all the more so in the land of Israel, then you're doing what Rebbe Nachman is saying here, but you're conquering the land and making it holy. Sheyeh makom Yisraeli, that it should be a kosher Jewish place. V'zeu gam ken b'chinat Eretz Yisrael shayu echolim lomar gazlanim atem, and this is also related to the land of Israel. Well, let's go back here for a second because there's two notes. So regarding, let's read the sentence here. V'gam achshav u'berashut mishu achok ma'od mikdushat Yisrael. Even now, the lands that the Jews are living in is run by, or is controlled by people who are very distant from the holiness of the Jewish people. With his discussion here, Rebbe Nachman alludes to the conquering and sanctification he himself was effecting at that very moment by revealing godliness in a place extremely distant from the sanctity of Israel. In the late summer of 1810, Rebbe Nachman relocated from Breslov to the city of Uman, which was a bastion of the Enlightenment. Just to clarify, the Enlightenment is where people stopped being religious Jews believing in God, became secular Jews who wanted nothing to do with religion. Where the local maskilim, the enlightened ones, used their influence with the authorities to turn Jews away from God. Reb Nachman provides the following account. It was Shabbat Nachamu in Uman, 2 months before the Rebbe's passing, and this is what happened. He had just moved into his new quarters where he would eventually pass away, and the Rebbe was very pleased with his lodgings, which were spacious and airy because they opened onto a garden. However, the house belonged to a well-known sinner. On Shabbos night, the Rebbe left his room to the room where the people gathered. He was very weak and scarcely had the strength to speak. He immediately recited the Kiddush and then sat at the table. He did not return to his room as he usually did at such a gathering. He sat weakly and began speaking in a very feeble voice. In this lesson which he then gave, the lesson that we're learning. The Rebbe also alluded to his apartment. He said, now as well in the diaspora, Jews come to a place, they conquer it and sanctify it, making it a Jewish place in the concept of the land of Israel. Others would then be able to say you were robbers. However, through the power of his acts, we have the power to conquer the entire world and sanctify it with the holiness of Israel. For the Blessed One created it, and by his wish he gave it to them, and by his wish he took it from them and gave it to us. And all this is elaborated upon in the lesson. Now, when Rebbe Nachman arrived in Uman, the 5th of Iyar, in 1810, he first stayed in the house of a recently deceased maskil, Nachman Nassim Rappaport. I guarantee you, if Rebbe Nachman had not stayed there, nobody would remember his name, maybe just his family. While still on the way from Breslov, the Rebbe remarked that on the coincidence that he and Reb Nassim were traveling to the house of Nachman Nassim, and how he would be making Kiddush in a house where great care had been taken never to mention God's name. So here's Rebbe Nachman giving an example. First, he's going to Uman, a bastion of enlightenment. He's going to the house of a Jew that made an extra special effort never to mention God's name, and in that house, he's making Kiddush. That's how Rebbe Nachman says, we conquer the land and we sanctify it. And this is what we do when we go and we do a mitzvah anywhere in the world. That's what we're doing. We're conquering the land and elevating it in that way. Where am I here? Shortly before Shabbat Nachamu, the Rebbe moved to the house belonging to the man from Lukach, a well-known sinner. It was while lodging there that the Rebbe gave this lesson. So the Rebbe was going, and specifically, and this is what Chabad is doing as well. I'm sure there are other people individually, maybe other organizations that are doing, but Chabad is known for this. Chabad will put a Chabad house where they think, the deepest, darkest action is, and try to bring light there. That's the Chabad concept of, it recently appeared in our Yom Yom, the daily Chabad learning, that we're day workers. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe called it. Our job is to bring light, which is the criticism that some Chabad rabbis had about me for some of the articles I wrote. And of course they were right, but I wrote them anyhow. Okay, back up here. Kovshim hamakom mekadshim oto sheyeh makom Yisraeli. So regarding conquering the land, conquering a place and making it holy, we learned just a couple of lessons ago in lesson 76, where Rebbe Nachman likewise discusses the rectifications that the Jewish people accomplish as a result of their sojourning outside the land of Israel. Wherever they go in exile, initially they are subjugated, but afterwards they become masters over their masters, because afterwards they conquer that place to which they have been exiled, for Israel raises and elevates all the low and fallen places. And you have to be always the energy that's pushing back against the darkness. If we talked about Shabtai Tzvi and the Frankists, how they had this idea that they were going to go into the deepest darkness and they were going to elevate it. But you can't go in and elevate it. I did an interview recently with Ruth Weiss, who was the head of the Yiddish department at Harvard University. I'm still editing the interview with her. We're going to finish up here in just a second. And one of the questions I asked her is, what's the role that Chabad plays on campus? So I had a little hint beforehand, because a friend of mine knew that she had a clash with Chabad on campus at Harvard. And that in the end, she became a real ally of Chabad. So she answered the question beautifully. And that was, in this interview, unfortunately, the sound is not very good, but the content is really excellent. So she said, what is Chabad doing as opposed to Hillel? She said, Hillel accommodates everyone. You're Orthodox, we have an Orthodox minion. You're Reform, we have a Reform minion. You want to be anti-Zionist, we accept you. You want to be Zionist, we accept you. She said, Chabad is not like that. Chabad, you come to the Chabad house, they don't ask you to do anything. They are who they are, and they don't compromise on anything. They're halachic Jews. She said, you learn what it is to keep kosher, you learn what it is to keep Shabbos, you learn what it is to have a family, and be a normal, stable person. She said, that's what you learn in Chabad. And you want to be anti-Zionist? You can be anti-Zionist. They're not going to accommodate you. You just be you. You want to be Reformed? You be Reformed. You want to be Orthodox? You be Orthodox. She said, Chabad does not compromise. And that's the unique thing that Chabad brings to the campus. And that's the idea of making that and connecting this exactly to what we're learning now. What does it mean to conquer a place and make it holy? That's what Chabad is doing. That's the example that the Chabad houses are setting. So I'm going to quickly go through the text, and then we've got like one more page here. And to get to the next section, and then I'm going to tell a short story. וזהו גם כן בחינת ארץ ישראל, שהיו יכולים לומר גזלנים אתם, and this is also related to the land of Israel, where people could say you're a bunch of thieves, שכבשתם את המקום שאינו שלכם אך, that you conquered a land that wasn't yours, however, על ידי כוח המעשיו, but through Hashem's power, בחינת 10 מאמרות, which is connected to the 10 utterances, meaning that Hashem is creating the world. That's why the Jewish people are in the land of Israel. על ידי זה, יש לנו רשות לכבוש את כל העולם. That's why they have the authority, the permission to conquer the whole world. ולקדשו, and to sanctify it, בקדושת ישראל, with the holy sanctity of the Jewish people. כי הוא יתברך ברעם, because Hashem created the world, וברצונו נתנה לנו. It's Hashem's will to give it to us. נמצא ש10 מאמרות שהם מלובשים בדרך ארץ. So we find, and it follows then, the 10 utterances which are enclosed in settling the land, היינו, יישוב העולם, that is, settling the land, כי הם נברא העולם, because these words that Hashem spoke are what created the world, הם דרך לארץ ישראל, and they are the path to the land of Israel, כי על ידי בחינת 10 מאמרות יכולים לכבוש ארץ ישראל כנ"ל. Because it's only through the words that Hashem is speaking, which is bringing about creation, which within, hidden in them, is the Torah, that the Jewish people can conquer the land of Israel. וזהו בחינת דרך ארץ, and this is the meaning of derech eretz, which has many meanings, but here it means settling the world. היינו שהוא דרך ונתיב לארץ, that is, that it is the path and way to the land. היינו לארץ ישראל, that is, to the land of Israel. כי דרך ארץ הוא יישוב העולם, because דרך ארץ means settling the world. שנברא ב10 מאמרות, which was created with the 10 utterances. זה בעצמו הוא דרך ונתיב לארץ ישראל כנ"ל. This in itself is a road and a path to the land of Israel as mentioned above. וזהו דרך ארץ, היינו דרך לארץ ישראל כנ"ל. And this is derech eretz, that is the path to the land of Israel as mentioned above. There's a lot of things in here which was kind of complicated. I'm just going to read the translation, maybe it'll make more sense. It follows that the 10 utterances enclosed in worldly occupation, namely in settling the world, since the world was created through them, are the road to the land of Israel. Thus, through the concept of the 10 utterances, it is possible to conquer the land of Israel. This is the concept of derech eretz, worldly occupation. It is the derech, the road, and path to Eretz, i.e. Eretz Yisrael, that is the land of Israel. This is because derech eretz, which is settling the world, that was created with the 10 utterances, is itself the road and the path to the land of Israel, as mentioned above. This is derech eretz, this is the derech to Eretz Yisrael. So he's saying that it's not just derech eretz is ultimately the path to the land of Israel, but what it really means, it really means that, but it also has the other meaning of wherever you are in the world as a Jew, it's your job to make that place a holy place, and by doing that, you are creating a path to the land of Israel. And you can think of it literally as just an outpost, think I'm coming back again and again to a Chabad house. Imagine you come to a Chabad house, you start to learn, and after a few years the Rebbe says to you, you know what, you should go to this yeshiva in Jerusalem, it's called Mayanot. And that's how a lot of these guys end up in the Mayanot yeshiva, or go on a birthday trip. That's how creating a sanctified place outside of the land of Israel is literally a path to the land of Israel. And through this derech eretz, haynu derech shel Eretz Yisrael, that is making a path. So settling the world, making it holy, that is making a path that takes people to the land of Israel. Shehu b'chinat 10 ma'amorot shebehem nivra olam. That this is connected to the 10 utterances which Hashem is using to create the whole world. Shesham ne'elemet haTorah, that within Hashem's speech the Torah is concealed. Shebezeh haya ha'olam yitkayem b'chasto 26 dorot shekodem natan Torah. This is how the world existed for 26 generations before the Torah was given, because Hashem was speaking the world into creation. V'zeh ba'atzmo tzaddik mechayeh atzmo be'et pshituto she'eino osek b'Torah. It is this, using this power, the primordial power before the Torah was given, that the tzaddik sustains himself at the time that he's not connected to the Torah. Ki az hu mechaya atzmo b'chinat Torah hane'elemet b'toch ha'olam. So then the tzaddik sustains himself through the Torah, but not the revealed Torah, the hidden Torah that exists within the world that's being created through Hashem's speaking. B'chol hadiburim, b'chol ha'uvdot, shenivra'u ba'asara ma'amarot. With all of the speech and all of the actions in which the 10 utterances created the world, shesham ne'elemet ha'torah kanam. And within there, that the Torah is hidden, as mentioned above. Wow, there's a huge note here, but I don't want to take too much time. So let's read just a few parts of it here. Okay. We'll read about Rebbe Nachman's trip, and then I'll tell you a story. Rebbe Nachman's pilgrimage to the land of Israel, which was from 1798 to 1799, coincided with Napoleon Bonaparte's siege of the Ottoman-defended city of Akko. I don't know if you know that, but there was a connection. Shalom Aleichem to Shana Batsheva, and to Jesse, and to Chaya, and everybody's joining us at the last 5 minutes. So, you know, the Rebbe Nachman and Napoleon, the Alter Rebbe and Napoleon, there was a great pushback against Napoleon. So Napoleon had just conquered the Ottoman defended city of Akko, whose capture the French considered the linchpin to their conquest of the Holy Land. This was in 1799. The Rebbe was in Sfat when news reached that Napoleon was about to invade Akko. He sent an envoy to book a passage on a neutral ship leaving Akko for Europe, and soon after he arrived at the port city together with his attendant. However, at that time, their ship was already filled beyond capacity and it was impossible for them to board. The Rebbe and his attendant spent Shabbos in Akko. On Sunday, the city became a seething mass of terror. What a great, terrible word there. The Pasha had given all civilians 2 hours to flee the city or be killed. Amidst the great confusion, the Rebbe and his attendant found their way to a small sailboat filled with Turks, and after a while left the port and brought them to a large ship anchored in the harbor off Haifa. Little did they know that they were boarding a Turkish warship. Rebbe Nachman writes that the Rebbe and his attendant were in indescribable danger. There were 2 Jews alone on a warship filled with Turkish troops. These Turks would think nothing of selling the 2 Jews as slaves in some faraway place. The very thought filled the Rebbe's heart with dread. He began to think about what he would do if he were sold as a slave in a faraway place where there were no Jews. What if nobody knew about it? How would he keep the commandments of the Torah? This particularly bothered him the most. The Rebbe pondered the possibilities again and again. Finally, he was worthy of realizing that he could serve God even if he were unable to actually keep the commandments. He comprehended the commandments, even though he often did so in only a symbolic manner. The Rebbe thought along these lines until he understood how he could keep all the commandments in this manner. He could continue to serve God even if he were sold as a slave in the most distant land. No sooner had the Rebbe arrived at this conclusion when they sighted land. It was the night before Pesach when they arrived at the island of Rhodes. They knew the city had a thriving Jewish community, and here they would be able to buy matzot and wine for Pesach. Both the Paparot, the Chochmah, and Be'ibei HaNachal point to this account of Rebbe Nachman's journey from the land of Israel as an indication that even when he was separated from revealed Torah, the Rebbe could serve God from the hidden level of the Torah that he had attained. And that's what we were talking about in this lesson. Okay, so Yasher Koach to everyone. I'll tell you a short story of Rebbe Yisrael of Velednik. This is one of Reb Shlomo's classic stories of the Velednik Rebbe. So Rebbe Yisrael was a top chassid of Reb Motula Chernobler, who was the first place that I visited on my trip to Ukraine. And it's amazing how you just go on a short trip and go to the graves of these tzaddikim, and all of a sudden you really feel, it's quite amazing, you feel a connection with them in a way that you couldn't have otherwise. So Reb Motule, this was one of his closest chassidim, Reb Yisrael of Velednik, and he heard that there was a couple that had separated. And you know, these days, la aleinu, lots of couples get divorced. Bezat Hashem, anyone who's gotten divorced should get remarried and have shalom bayit. Anyone who hasn't gotten married yet should get married and have shalom bayit. And everyone who is married should have shalom bayit. Bezat Hashem. In those days, nobody got divorced. It was an unheard of idea unless it was a very, very extreme situation. There was a couple, they'd been married for 10 years, and the wife moved out of the house and moved in with her parents. Word got back to the Rebbe, and he calls the wife in and says, "What's going on?" And he said, "You don't love your husband anymore?" And she said, "No, of course I love my husband." So he said, "You've been married for 10 years. Why are you leaving your husband?" She said, "Rebbe, we've been married for 10 years, but we haven't had any children. Give me a blessing that I should have children, and I'll move back in with my husband." So he was about to give the blessing, and then she said, "But 1 second, Rebbe, if you're going to give me a bracha for children, bless me that I should have a son like you." The Veledniker said, "You want a son like me? Then you have to promise me to be a mother like my mother." And he told her 2 stories about his mother. Unfortunately, when Rebbe Yisrael was 7 years old and his brother was 5 years old, his father passed away and left the 2 of them with their mother. And one day, her mother is sick in bed, and she calls her son Yisrael and says, "Bring me a siddur, please. I have to daven." And she opens the siddur, and she says, "Hashem, I'm all that these children have in this world. They have nobody to take care of them. And I'm sick here in bed. Hashem, you have to make me healthy so I can take care of my children. Not for my sake, but for their sake." And the Veledniker, he said, "I swear to you that my mother got out of bed and she was healthy." So I'll tell you another story about my mother. One time she was benching licht. She was lighting the candles for Friday night for Shabbos. And he said, "You know how many tears my mother cried after losing her husband and how difficult it was to raise these children on her own?" He said one time she was crying over the candles and her tears put out the candles and it was already Shabbos. And she looks down at her Shabbos candles and she sees that they're out. She says, "Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe, how can I enter Shabbos without the light of Shabbos? Please relight my candles." And the Veledniker said, "I literally saw a hand coming down and relighting my mother's candles for Shabbos." He said, "So you want a bracha that you should have a son like me? Then you have to be a mother like my mother." So Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue the lesson next week. Hopefully we'll finish it next week. Because the week after that, there's not going to be a class. Next week there is a class. The week after, because my daughter's getting married, which is crazy. And she's just the first of 2 getting married in the next month and a half. And we still didn't send out invitations for the wedding, which in itself is a little nuts. But what are you going to do? Okay. Let's kill my guitar. Let's see. Continue. Have a good Shabbos, and don't forget Purim is coming. Shakoch.